When we picture ancient gods, we're usually thinking about, mythology, thunderbolts, ancient prayers, that kind of thing. But today, we're diving into something entirely different. We're going to explore how the ancient Phoenicians actually engineered deity, Melqart, not just for worship, but as a brilliant, highly functional piece of technology for statecraft and global economics.
It presents us with a fascinating puzzle. Think about the ancient world for a second. It was completely dominated by massive, conquering military forces. And yet the Phoenicians managed to build this incredibly vast network of trade and colonies stretching all the way across the Mediterranean, all without a massive standing army to enforce their will. So how you do that? Well, the answer really lies in using faith as the ultimate infrastructure. They essentially used a shared religious system to establish absolute trust, draw legal boundaries, and drive their economic expansion.
So let's start with his origins as the king of Tyre. Our story actually kicks off around the 10th century BC under King Hiram I, right in the impregnable, fortified island city of Tyre. And to really grasp Melqart's function, we just need to look at his name. Melqart comes directly from the Northwest Semitic roots MLK, meaning king, and QRT, meaning city, literally, the king of the city. Originally, he was the literal embodiment of Tyre itself, merging their ancestral royalty with the seasonal agricultural cycles of the Eastern Mediterranean. He was, at his core, the ultimate protector of home. But of course, as the master of the sea, his influence didn't just stop at the city walls. Because the Phoenicians definitely didn't just stay home. These guys were arguably the greatest seafarers of the ancient world. And as they expanded their horizons across the Mediterranean, Melqart evolved right alongside them. He transformed from a local protector into this fierce guarantor of maritime sovereignty. He became the supreme force that granted fair winds to the famous Phoenician merchant ships, the Gaulos. Before these brave sailors ventured out into the completely unknown waters of the Atlantic, they would routinely stop at his coastal temples, leaving votive offerings. They were literally banking on his divine protection to guarantee safe passage. And as Phoenician culture started bumping up against others, something incredibly useful happened. Through a practice where cultures essentially map foreign gods onto their own, the Greeks and Romans seamlessly assimilated Melqart with their own legendary hero, Heracles. Because Melqart was famous for clearing the wilderness and battling sea monsters, the Greeks saw their own civilizing hero mirrored right there in the Phoenician god. It instantly created this incredibly effective bridge of mutual understanding between entirely different civilizations. And this mutual understanding naturally became the blueprint for empire. Here is where Melqart transitions from mere mythology into a literal tool for imperial expansion. Think about it. Phoenician trade relied on immense trust across vast distances. You couldn't exactly just call the local authorities if a deal went sour in another country. So his temples stepped in to act as ancient central banks and neutral international courts. Merchants would swear binding oaths directly before his altars. Violating a commercial contract wasn't just frowned upon or considered bad business. It was an act of direct sacrilege against the god himself. In a very real way, faith was their financial regulation. This system built an absolutely unbreakable network across the ancient world. You had Tyre and Lebanon serving as the home sanctuary. Then Carthage over in Tunisia acted as the administrative and cultural anchor. Gadir in Spain was the major Western trading hub, and Malta functioned as this crucial Mediterranean checkpoint. Whenever Phoenician explorers set up a new outpost, the very first civic act they did was construct a temple of Melqart. It legally, culturally, and financially tied every single one of these far-flung colonies straight back to the mother city. Now, to maintain this kind of psychological hold, they relied heavily on fire and sacred pillars. To sustain this massive network of power and really project institutional stability, the Tyrians practiced deeply visceral rituals. The absolute crown jewel of the cult was the annual Egersis festival in early spring. It was an intense process. First, high priests would construct a massive ritual pyre. Then, a symbolic representation of the god was burned, which simulated his descent into death. Finally, this was followed by ecstatic celebrations marking his resurrection, his spring awakening, and the cosmic renewal of order itself. Now, unlike the Greeks, who are constantly filling their temples with these very human-like statues, early Phoenician sanctuaries practiced strict Aniconism, meaning the inner sanctums contained absolutely no statues of the god at all. Instead, to represent the earth and the sky, they erected two magnificent cosmic pillars. One was coated entirely in beaten gold, and the other was carved from this glowing green smalt, which is a type of emerald glass. The visual impact of these glowing pillars in a dark temple must have been absolutely stunning. And the atmosphere inside these sanctuaries was intensely controlled. Eternal holy fires burned perpetually on his altars, and they were tended by celibate priests operating under the absolute strictest of rules. We're talking pure white linen garments, going completely barefoot, and having shaved heads. There was also a total ban on pork anywhere within the temple precincts, and women were generally excluded from the inner sanctuaries. Every single detail was designed to project an aura of absolute, uncompromising purity. And all of this power created massive echoes in ancient history. This system of religious and economic power was so incredibly successful that it constantly intersected with the biggest names of antiquity. Back in the 5th century BCE, the famous historian Herodotus personally visited the temple in Tyre to see it for himself. Fast forward to 332 BCE, and you have Alexander the Great demanding permission to sacrifice inside the temple to claim legitimacy. When the Tyrians flat out refused him, it sparked a brutal 7-month siege. And then in 218 BCE, right before marching his elephants over the Alps, Hannibal Barca made a solemn pilgrimage to the temple in Gadir just to secure divine favor. Melqart was literally at the absolute center of ancient geopolitics. His influence even spilled over into the biblical world. Melqart and related Tyrian deities entered the ancient Israelite world through the royal marriage of Jezebel, who was the daughter of the king of Tyre and King Ahab. Jezebel's active promotion of these Phoenician religious traditions in the northern kingdom of Israel brought them directly into a fierce, historic conflict with early Israelite prophets, most notably the prophet Elijah. It gives us a really fascinating look at how these different cultural and theological systems competed and clashed in the ancient Near East. And incredibly, Melqart's legacy actually provided the physical key that unlocked Phoenician history for us in the modern era. Over in Malta, archaeologists discovered the Cippi of Malta. These are 2 beautiful marble candelabra from the 2nd century BC, and they feature a bilingual dedication to both Melqart and his Greek equivalent, Heracles. Because it was written in both Greek and Phoenician, it allowed a French scholar named Jean-Jacques Barthélemy to finally crack and decipher the entire Phoenician alphabet back in 1758. Talk about a historical game changer. Now, I want you to just think about the number 2,000. That is the staggering number of years the Tyrian priests claimed their majestic temple foundations had stood by the time Herodotus visited in the 5th century BCE. Now, even if that was a bit of a boast, it still speaks volumes about the incredible institutional longevity this system provided for their people. So I want to leave you with one final kind of provocative thought. When we look at the immense, undeniable success of the Phoenician network, we really have to ask ourselves, was it true organic belief that bridged the ancient Mediterranean? Or was the deity Melqart, with his commercial oaths, his central bank temples, and his colonial blueprints, simply the most successful piece of economic and political technology ever invented by the ancient mind? It's a brilliant question to ponder. Keep exploring.